Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. And I hope you're as excited as we are about the League of Women Voters Day of Action. So we've been looking forward to April 29th for some time. And it's a really big year. And because of the census data and because of what it will mean for all of us with redistricting, how our maps are drawn, where our resources are allocated to. And so it's a big topic that we are covering tonight. Just as people are coming into the space, we want you to know that number one, this is being recorded. So we ask that you please mute your mic. So right now, everyone's mic is being muted as you come in. We hope that you get really engaged and curious as we are about this topic. And so if you have questions, we'd ask you to actually keep your mics muted. Use that chat room to put some questions. It's a really content-rich program that Kate's going to be presenting. And so we want to give her the opportunity to go through all of the slides that have been presented for understanding this situation better with redistricting. And then at the end, we're going to go into that chat and Cindy's going to be curating some of those questions because there may be some repeats or some related questions that we can tie together and then have a really good conversation about it. So I am just thrilled to be introducing this topic today and introducing Kate Himes in particular. She is such a devoted board member at the Mid-Hudson League of Women Voters, chairing our Voter Services and Education Committee, and a huge part of why I am involved in the league is due to the efforts of Kate and how inspired I am by her service to this organization. So hopefully that works for everybody, that you're going to put your questions in the chat, probably not doing raising our hands until the end when we get to the discussion. So for everyone who just came in fresh, we are recording this session. Cindy has given us a really wonderful invitation for you all tonight, which is what is spoken here leaves here, right? It's the opposite of Vegas. We actually want you to share everything tonight, and probably because it is such a content-rich topic that we're covering, it might be great for you to actually go into our website tomorrow or go on our Facebook when you see this recording, live or not live, but shareable, and share that out. And we were just kind of tossing around some ideas before 7 o'clock about who would really love this recording who wasn't able to join us at 7 o'clock. Maybe we have teachers that are in participation in government classes. Maybe we have librarians. Maybe we have nonprofit organizations that really need to understand redistricting. So please share the information freely, because that's actually what we hope that you do with it. So all of that is our housekeeping for how we're going to run tonight. And what I'm going to do is start sharing my screen in just a minute. People-powered fair maps is not so easy to always say. People-powered fair maps. But really, League of Women Voters is, sort of one of the tenets of the models of democracy that we always want to talk about is fair and equal representation, and how important representation is to every other conversation that's happening. So tonight's program is prompted by the fact that the first census data was released April 26th, specific to apportionment, but the rest of it's going to be rolling out now. And so what does that mean in terms of our representation and our resources? And that's that's a big bite of what Kate's going to help us walk through today. I just want to say the League of Women Voters in the Mid-Hudson region is covering the Dutchess, Ulster, and newly invited Orange County areas. So we are going to be talking generally in the beginning, but then Kate will bring it down to a local level by the end of it, which is, I think, so important. So do you see my boxes over here? I need to get rid of this, right? Are you guys seeing that? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I think you're good.
Okay, so this is, we wanted to share the League of Women Voters national redistricting position to support redistricting processes and enforceable standards that promote fair and effective representation at all levels of government and maximum opportunity for public participation. So hopefully this is just the beginning of your inquiry and curiosity about what the process is, so that you could perhaps give testimony, over the course of the summer. There's going to be opportunity for citizens to engage in this conversation, and we hope that you're so called to do that. So this is just a basic outline for tonight. The basics of redistricting, kind of some of the lingo, because some of it was new to me. The connection to that census data and apportionment, again, that's kind of just the conversation that's happened over the last couple of days. What that means to New York in particular, understanding gerrymandering and fairness factors. And so we're going to take a look at some districts in New York and also understand some of our gerrymandering issues locally, and what our plans for and the impact you can make in New York State going forward. So at this time, it's my pleasure to pass the presentation over to Kate Himes. And thank you so much, Kate, for leading this discussion tonight.
Okay. Hi, everyone. As thank you, Mara, for such a wonderful setup for this evening, and we'll be moving through the discussion. So let's get started. So Mara, let's take a look at, there we go. Okay, first slide having to do with basic question. What is redistricting? And I think everyone should have some sense, but it's the process of drawing our legislative districts. And under federal law, redistricting must occur following the census. And as you know, this last, the 2020 census has been completed. The information about federal congressional representation and how it's affecting each state has already been released, and there's more information that will be released as the data continues to be analyzed. And so why it happens every 10 years. First, new districts must be drawn when a state gains or loses congressional districts as a result of the apportionment of congressional districts to the states. So there's a limited number, I'm sure everyone is aware, there are a limited number of congressional districts. And as population shifts from one state to another state, additional legislative seats are not added, but because of population, then seats are moved around depending on the shifts. And then secondly, even if the number of districts does not change, governments must redraw districts so that the districts have equal populations. So that's the goal of redistricting. So Mara? Okay, as mentioned in the past slide, this occurs every 10 years following the national census. And hopefully everyone here sent in their data for the 2020 census, so you were counted. And in New York State, we found out recently of just how important it is for everyone to be counted. After the Census Bureau releases this new data in the year ending in 1, which is this year, 2021, then the process for redistricting begins. New congressional districts and state legislative districts. So at this point, in terms of the census data, we know how it will impact states in terms of congressional districts, but it also impacts state legislative districts, which must be drawn according to the new data to ensure roughly equal population in each of the districts. So, Mara? Okay, why does all this matter and why is it important? We're going to spend a lot of time addressing those questions. Political and racial gerrymandering distorts and undermines representative democracy by allowing officials to select their voters rather than voters to elect their officials. When done for the purposes of racial discrimination or to ensure the dominance of one political party, gerrymandering runs counter to equal voting rights for all eligible voters. And there's been a lot of national emphasis placed on this issue of gerrymandering and how districts are currently actually selected by many officials so that the outcome matches what some particular group, political party in some instances, would like. Okay, Maura. So now we're going to take a look at the census versus apportionment versus redistricting. So how do all of these things connect to one another? We've talked a bit already about the census, so I won't go over that information. The one thing here that's different is that the census tries to count every person and resident in the United States, regardless of citizenship. So I'm sure that if you've been following the data as it has been rolled out, sometimes what makes the difference between a state maintaining or losing a congressional seat can be a small number of individuals. In the case of New York State, it's less than 100 made the difference. Okay, apportionment is the process of taking the total census count and dividing that number by the total number of seats in Congress, 435. So as I mentioned before, that is a set number and is set by law. And so as population shifts, that determines how those seats are assigned. And the process for doing that assignment is called redistricting. I don't know why I'm having such problems with that word, but anyway, takes the number of people per seat or district to draw lines that are substantially equal in population. Now, here's some of the criteria, and here's some of that special lingo that Mara was referring to in the introduction. Here are the criteria for that the league in particular looks to for redistricting. As we've already stated a couple of times, equal population or as close to equal population as is possible, so that no single district can have a much larger number of people within the district than another. And geographic continuity refers to the fact that district borders must be a single line and not a jagged configuration of lines. We're going to take a look at a district a little later to see what that looks like. Promotion of partisan fairness, and that is district lines should not be drawn according to the number of citizens in a particular political party. That in the past in this country has generated lawsuits on occasion, and communities taking a look at it and saying that that redistricting is done in a way that benefits particular parties versus others. Preservation and protection of communities of interest. Now, there are also groups or neighborhoods. There are neighborhoods, language, socioeconomic, or shared cultural or religious groups, urban versus rural, etc., also should be taken into account in drawing those lines so that you have, which is interesting because you have all of those characteristics that a community may, or a group of people may have a community of interest, but keep in mind that the community of interest is not their politics or a particular political party. The criteria are different than that. Respect for boundaries of municipalities and counties. So you want to keep as much as possible in drawing those lines to keep municipalities and counties whole. That you don't want to have, for example, which does happen, and we have some examples here in the Hudson Valley, where half of a particular municipality will be in one congressional district and another half of the municipality, quite literally in some instances, you cross the street and you're in another congressional district. So that should be avoided. You want to keep them as whole as possible. Also, another good sign of redistricting is compactness and competitiveness. If they do not conflict with if they do not conflict with the other criteria, then you want districts should contain the smallest amount of square miles. Okay, so that's so that you don't get districts that are snaky or spidery or some of the other shapes you may have heard people describe. As long as they meet the other districting requirements. So you want them to be compact and kind of uniform looking when you see them on a map, rather than like creepy crawly creatures. Okay. Next. From the CEO of the National League, Virginia Casey, says, making sure that people feel their votes matter. That's what we hear from people all over the country. Because of the way maps are cracked, and we'll be talking about that in a minute, or packed, people squashed together, many voters are not represented fairly. Okay, Mara. Okay, so here's some examples of what they mean by cracking and packing. You can see them on your screen. What happens in cracking? Cracking spreads out voters from a certain group across many districts so that their influence is diluted in any given district. Okay, and you can see that an example of cracking on the screen. Packing, on the other hand, concentrates a like group of voters. For example, by political party, Democrats, by race, Black voters, together in excess. When these voters are packed into a few districts, their influence on surrounding districts is reduced. Their votes are wasted because there are more votes than necessary for the group to elect their preferred candidate of choice. So that kind of goes back to that. It's the idea where they're talking about preserving and protecting communities of interest is that you can overpack a community of interest, which makes their, as this indicates, their votes wasted because fewer of them could have existed when in a particular district and still had their candidate of choice. And they might have had some influence in other districts as well, if the excess numbers of them had been spread out for greater competition. And then, of course, the first example of the three here is one that what a competitive district might look like. And you can see, at least in terms of some of the criteria that were mentioned, that it is, even though I don't know if you'd ever get one quite this compact in real life, but they're, the example here we have is very compact. And it aims for the kind of distribution that we would like to see in a district. Okay, Mara. So the other language or fancy language or jargon we've been talking about is gerrymandering, but I'm sure everyone on this call has previously heard about gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is a manipulation of electoral boundaries to disadvantage a political party, a racial minority, or an ethnic group. Now, when redistricting fails the citizens, and here we are, this is one of those districts that kind of looks like a creepy crawly that extends. This is an example of a district, and they can become really, with the advent of computers and computer analysis of census data, individuals running for legislative seats can become very, very precise in selecting where their voters reside. So that not only can you get a municipality divided, you can get a single block divided, so that possibly 2 houses in one neighborhood belong in one district, and the other 10 houses in that neighborhood are in another district, in order to accommodate a district that favors. And in most instances, it's a district that favors a political party, Democrat or Republican. Both have long histories of having done this. Okay, and here's another view of District 51.
It's the same one. It's just a little bit more detail there, so you could see the counties. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and you can look and you can see that it goes all the way from Tompkins County and Cayuga out in western New York, and comes all the way across the narrowly across the midsection of New York State. And then it expands again once it gets into Otsego, and I can't quite see what the county above that is, and picks up Schoharie, and then it snags down into Ulster County, actually, down here. So that's a good example of this kind of gerrymandering.
I think that's Herkimer right on the top above Oswego.
Yeah. And it goes into Herkimer just a tiny little bit. Mm-hmm. Okay, on the issue of racism and gerrymandering. Racial gerrymandering takes place in order to water down or dilute the vote so that these communities lose their voice in government. And racism has been at the center of voter suppression tactics throughout our country's history. If you follow the work, for example, of Stacey Adams, one of the things that is constantly at the forefront of her work in terms of voter suppression is issues of gerrymandering of districts. Okay, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Okay, prison gerrymandering. In Ulster and Dutchess County, as this says, we have two large state prisons. And there's gerrymandering that occurs around prisons. Prison gerrymandering is the practice of counting people based on where they're confined rather than where they're from. This inflates representation in areas where prisons are built and dilutes the voting power of the people who are incarcerated and their home communities.
And let me just say, the league supports all across New York State a lot of voter registration activities in our judicial system, in the jails in particular, and the prisons, and when people come out and are on parole, doing registration for them as well. So it's important to us that people understand that population.
Yeah, and there's some changes in that will be occurring, not for those who are in prison, but for the formerly incarcerated and those in local jails that will be occurring here in New York State. And part of our voter service is to provide that information to individuals as well. Okay, how to tell if a district is gerrymandered. Okay, here's what to look for. When one party has more candidates than its share of votes for that party. When there is an office holder of another party where a majority of voters of the opposite party reside, and does this change last over several election cycles? One of the things that has happened, particularly with congressional districts, is there's constantly the conversation about the fact, and you've probably heard this in news, but that there are numbers of districts, both Republican and Democrat, where it doesn't matter who challenges the incumbent, because the district is structured so that as long as a Republican and or a Democrat wants to hold that seat, they will hold the seat. No one, it's virtually impossible for someone from the opposing party to have a chance. So that the real election, as someone says, occurs at the primary level, but which is intra-party. Okay, check to see if lines were drawn by one party only. And in many states, that is the case, because the state legislators, in some instances, in most instances, some states have independent redistricting commissions. Many states do not. And where states do not, then the state legislature draws those lines. And if that legislature is dominated by one particular party, they tend to draw lines that favor their party. Once again, whether that is Democrat or Republican. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court has recently declined to rule on whether lines can be legally gerrymandered, even though the court has a past history of determinations for district lines. To illustrate the point, it wasn't until the Supreme Court ruled in the 1960s that population had anything to do with redistricting. Okay, so now we're back to New York State. How does this work in New York State? Okay, in 2014, New York State passed a constitutional amendment creating an independent redistricting commission, which is a good thing. So we can all say, yay. So let's see the next slide.
Kate, no one's saying yay, only because I told them to mute and everyone's just really following the rules, but excitement on all the boxes, I'm sure.
Yes.
Well, you know, there was some question about how this was done, though. Not everybody was happy with it.
Okay, so there you would you like to share a little bit of that before I move on?
I wouldn't want to be, you know, argue about why that was, but a lot of the good government groups said this was worse than nothing. And the league said, this is the best we're going to get, and we supported it. But it was not a simple decision on anybody's part.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, and now the Democrats are in control, and they're trying to make it less fair to everybody. So we're seeing what, you know, we feared might happen.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dare.
You'll see it on the ballot. There will be a ballot issue on this.
Yes. And for those of you who don't know, Dare Thompson is past president of the New York State League of Women Voters and has a long history with the League of Women Voters in New York State. So I really appreciate her input. Okay, Mara. Oh, and better yet, she's in the Mid-Hudson region. And we get the benefit of her wisdom.
Well, actually, the most important thing is I sat on the Ulster Commission that redrew the lines. That gave me a lot of insight.
Okay, well, we'll be there in a minute.
Yeah, but that, anyway, I'm going to mute myself. I just happened to not be muted, so I got to speak out.
Okay, so the redistricting process is there too. There's one at the national level, which is the congressional, and then there's the state legislative level. So in New York State, the state of New York currently comprises 27 congressional districts. We just recently learned we will now have 26 and not 27. And once again, to go back to about how close it can be with the census, a count of 89 residents of the state of New York made the difference for the loss of this one seat for New York State. So each district elects one member of the United States House of Representatives who sits on its behalf. The state was redistricted in 2013 following the 2010 US Census. It lost 2 seats in Congress. So this coming redistricting, we will lose 1 congressional seat. And that it was conducted by an independent redistricting commission, and the deadline for that work to be done is 2022. On the state side, the state legislature, there are 150 state legislative seats in the Assembly, 63 state legislative seats in the state Senate. And that too, that redistricting is conducted by an independent redistricting commission. The deadline for that has been extended due to census figures not being available until September 30th, 2021. So, yeah. Here's the list of people who make up the redistricting in New York State. If you look at these, you'll see obviously that it leans kind of heavily toward New York City and Long Island, but that's where the bulk of the state's population is. Okay, the cost, how is this financed? Staffing, the commission has hired 2 co-executive directors and is planning to hire additional staff. Travel, over the course of the commission's work, they will be required to hold a minimum of 12 public hearings. So that's something you should be looking out for in your local area for when those public hearings are going to be held. Some of them may have an opportunity to be held remotely. So some of them may be held remotely. Some of them will be in person, others may be Zoom. The commission must secure mapping software, create a public website, and live stream public hearings. So that's something else you want to look for. And actually live streaming is interesting because that gives you an opportunity, if you are so interested, to get a flavor of what's happening in areas outside of your local, to hear what other New Yorkers are saying about redistricting in New York State.
Yeah, and Kate, let me just interject. Thank you so much for being my partner on our call to our New York State Senator when we called to make sure that the software and staffing and travel was funded. So all the members of the League of Women Voters, Mid-Hudson Board of Directors had lobbying efforts just prior to the budgeting voting for New York State to make sure that we let everybody in Albany know that this is really, really important to the league. And so thanks for being with me on that call by Zoom, right? And we could do that with our legislators. Yeah.
Okay, these are the current state legislative districts in Dutchess County. And Dutchess County at the county level has a redistricting commission, was selected by the voters in 2020 and is at work redrawing lines this year. And here's Ulster County current independent reapportionment commission map. As Dare mentioned, she had been part of the previous independent for the 2010 census reapportionment and redistricting. She had been part of that process. And Dare, if there's anything that you would like to share with the group from your experience working on the Ulster County map, and there will be a new commission for the 2020.
Yeah, I don't have anything to share except that we were kind of historic in it. An hour ago, I listened to the Dutchess County Commission, which is had its second or third meeting, and they kept talking about the Ulster County effort because we created a document after it was over talking about how we did it and issues that came up and all that. And they're using our experience to help them along. So we're kind of, these two counties of ours, which we're lucky enough, this is our league, are trailblazers, and Ulster was the first. So, and there are interesting things, like if you look at the sort of rust-colored ones up there, which include in the Kingston area, that has Ulster, the town of Ulster in it, and see how it has kind of an axe, it's like an axe handle kind of, and it looks like it's been gerrymandered. And this is to me, an example of how, don't assume because the shape is funny that it's a bad thing. We just did that in order to keep the town of Ulster whole. So, because the town of Ulster has a weird shape. And Herkimer County is the same way in the state. It has a very weird shape. And one decade it was part of a district described as Abraham Lincoln riding a vacuum cleaner. And it's because the district is kind of like a top hat. So it creates funny looking districts. So, you have to kind of know the story sometimes when you see a funny district.
Okay, well, that just reminds me that one of the criteria is to keep municipalities whole. So if you have an odd shaped municipality, you can end up with what looks like a strange shape for a legislative district.
Right.
Yeah, but it meets the other criteria. Okay, New York's local governments will be redrawing district boundaries before the 2023 election cycle. And the city of Kingston has a city council that consists of 9 members, not including the mayor. The city council's redistricting commission information, it's not specified in the city charter what that commission is or what it should look like. The criteria used, once again, the information is not specified in the Kingston City Charter. And the time frame for it is once again not specified in the Kingston Charter. But we do know that the state sets a deadline that it has to be done before 2023.
I think that this just means that people have a real opportunity to make a difference, since it's not specified in the county, in the city charter, how it's done. So,
Mhm.
you know, citizens can decide this time.
So citizens can advocate for independent redistricting for the city. Okay. Okay, so the next thing we'll be talking about is how you can get involved, and we hope that we have some good questions that are going into the chat area for our follow-up discussion. First and foremost, as with almost everything, is to educate yourself. And then, as Mara said, to pass it on, including passing on whatever information you take away from this presentation, or passing on the fact that others can view this. The league will send out a notice when it's available, when the recorded version of this is available for others to view. Okay, you can help identify and engage community partners, build a base of support, get a group of concerned citizens together to study and learn about your districts. There are several free map making tools online to use. You can collaborate with like-minded individuals and organizations to make an activist plan. Sounds like something in particular the city of Kingston, since there isn't anything specified, should be get hard at work on. Of course, attend public meetings, and they can be live meetings or streamed meetings, since there's indication that some of the hearings will be streamed. Speak at public hearings for your communities of interest. And contact your elected representatives to let them know you want fair and representative districts. And of course, I write letters, make phone calls, send emails, make your voice heard, and let the representatives know what you expect in a redistricting process. And then, of course, to learn more about the league or to find out about the what the league will be doing or assisting or supporting in terms of redistricting, visit our website, and that's the link to the league's website there. It's a great resource for you as well. And at some point, you'll find a link that will take you to this recording as well. So we also had, in terms of educating ourselves, Mara also had some other sites that
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is when we stop sharing our PowerPoint, I'm going to drop into the chat, or I can actually open, I'm going to reshare. We wanted to go to the League of Women Voters national site for redistricting to take a look at some of the resources there, including a supporter toolkit. So let me stop sharing this, but only just for a moment so I can go into that national website. Let's take a look at that.
okay, and okay.
There's a lot of great information from this site. So I'll put the link in the chat in case people want to grab it and share it later. But it does a great job of running through some of those terms and processes that Kate has shared with us. You can definitely sign up for those news alerts, which I'm signed up for. I love getting those from National. Here's, when we talk about getting in touch with your representatives, this is wonderful here. And down below this blog is just fantastic. You want to talk a little bit about some of the things on here, Kate, the blog information?
Yeah, well, you will find some of the topics that we've touched lightly upon in this presentation. If you wanted to dive a bit more deeper into one of them, you're likely to find it here as an article or as a blog topic for discussion. So this would be part of educating yourself, or if you have a community of other interested individuals and you wanted resources for yourselves in order to begin to educate yourselves as this process moves forward in New York State. So there's once again, gerrymandering uphold. So this segregation in schools. So there are many ways in which gerrymandering functions. About gerrymandering having to do with environmental justice, what impact it has on environmental justice. There's the toolkit that Maura was referring to that you would find interesting.
I'm also going to just open a new tab. This is the U.S. Census. Are you seeing a new tab?
Yeah. So if you've never visited the U.S. Census site, you should go there. It just has amazing data. But for our purposes right now, there are 3 maps that you may want to take a look at, because the 2020 census map for the apportionment of the U.S. House of Representatives is there. It shows which states gain, which states lost seats. And what's really nice about these visuals is that they're really clear and something people can grasp easily. They also provide the other map that I found. There's changes in population and all of those things, but scroll up a little bit, Maura, because the one below that has the historical map. The second row of maps. Yeah. The historical apportionment data. That's a really fascinating one if you're really interested in digging deep into the process of apportionment. You can look at gain, where seats were gained, where seats were lost. In each of the censuses dating back to, I don't know, 1930. Dating back for quite a while. So you can see what has happened to your state over the course of time. And this one I found particularly, goes all the way back to 1910. So this one I found particularly interesting, and you can see political shifts happening across the country and taking a look at this particular map.
So speaking of maps, I'm queuing up for you Congressional District 19, where I happen to be sitting in tonight. And so a lot of our lead work straddles Congressional District 19. We also have 18. I think I have another one in orange. Kate and I were talking today about Poughkeepsie. This is interesting how Poughkeepsie's carved out. And that's kind of been something long discussed.
The congressional map was done by the courts, not by politicians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unusual. And I could say more about it, but just I've heard so many people trash the congressional maps, and it was done to be as fair as possible.
Mm-hmm. But it does have certain features of what is suggested as the criteria, in that it is largely compact. The lines are pretty much contiguous. You know, you don't get a lot of jagged and broken lines within it. I see, it looks like both Middletown and Poughkeepsie were carved to be outside of this district. But if you're going to be doing advocacy, if you want to be doing advocacy work around districts, then yeah, you need to become familiar with whatever your congressional district may be, to become familiar with it and what it looks like and actually, I think if I were pursuing this and pursuing activism around this, this would be the first place I would start, to know what my own congressional district looked like if you're doing this at the congressional level. Okay, well, I think that's it. Thank you for your attention. I hope this is helpful to you. And what questions do we have, Cindy?
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, someone did make a point, and this is really graphic. If a third grader this year will be graduating from high school in the next census. So people need to know that this is 10 years that these decisions are going to be made for. So that really kind of brings home the importance of doing it. Someone asked how to find out about meetings, and I know how to find out about Ulster meetings. The Redistricting Commission in Ulster County, that information is on the legislative calendar. So, you know, just go to whatever month of year you want to find out. I don't know about Dutchess, but I know that they are public, and there must be.
Yeah, I listened today at 5 o'clock, and it's whatever today is it third Thursday? No, last Thursday. I think it's the last Thursday of the month. And they have their own website. So if you Google Dutchess County Redistricting Commission, you should be able to find it, or else get in touch with the county government. But they're doing a great, very thoughtful job so far. It's been nice to watch.
And there was a question about whether maps would be available, and I believe that the draft map is going to be available in August. There will be public comment after the draft map is available, and then when the final map, the results of the Redistricting Commission does not have to be in until January. So there's time between when the maps are available and when the final map is drawn, for people to make their voice heard. I think that kind of covers the other questions.
Okay,
I wonder if it's clear, because I find most people are confused between reapportionment and redistricting, and they're so linked. They're like twins, sort of, but they're different.
Mm-hmm.
And I could explain it, or anybody else could explain it who's steeped in this stuff. But we're right now talking.
Go ahead, yes.
We're right now talking about reapportionment a lot in the news, because that's when the Census Bureau says how many people you get. And that's, how many Congress people you get. And they've reapportioned them based on the national population and your population as a state. That's reapportionment. Then when you actually draw the lines and divvy the population up in your own special way, that's redistricting. So you can see how they're connected. Here's your number. Okay, go play with it. Kind of, that's reapportionment, they're giving you the number. Does that sort of make sense?
No, that's good.
We have X number of Congress people. I can't remember the number now that we have, but we've gone down a lot from like 45 to 30, I don't know, 52 to 45 something.
Yep.
So here's another question. Is the delay in Census Bureau release of data expected to have a negative impact on the ability of the commissions to do their job? Certainly is going to, What do you think, Dare?
I hate to be talking so much, but I am steeped in this. We had almost no time to do it, and we did it. Because the way the legislation was written, the charter was written, and they fixed it now, we only had 6 weeks to draw the maps. And it was really weird. And it was a combination of the charter being written in too tight a way and the data coming as late as it possibly could to New York State. We just happened to be a really late state getting the data. And on top of that, the Census Bureau releases just the general numbers, but they also release, and you may know this or you may not, a lot of really important information like demographic information about ethnic groups, prison population, which is a whole nother topic. And we could not assign the prisoners to their home districts where they actually lived, not in prison, but where their homes, the way you were supposed to, and got sued by the ACLU for not doing it. And we said, hey, wait, we don't have the information, we can't do it. So that was bad for us. But as far as getting the raw numbers, we were able to work with it, and I think we did a reasonable job.
Then there's another comment about the hearings that, the concern is that the process will be rushed and that there won't be enough time for hearings. But I believe that that's set by law.
And
so that has to happen.
Any time for the hearings, and Dutchess is moving very slowly because it has lots of time. I mean, I'm just hearing them talk, oh, let's not meet until next month because we really can't do much till the numbers come down. And then they'll still have plenty of time as far as I can tell. But what they're starting to talk about, is anybody here from Dutchess?
I think so. Yeah.
Of course, Kathy's. But spread the word if you live in Dutchess that they're looking for opinions, and they seem naive about the opinions that are out there, because I've certainly heard them over the years about what people don't like about the current map. And so they're looking for them. On the other hand, I was in the audience and they weren't letting anybody in the audience speak. So and Ulster did. We had a time for people to comment. Mostly what we had were groupies who were really interested in the process and wanted to see it succeed, and gave us some really good ideas. The best idea of all that they gave us came from somebody in the audience. So that's something to push for if you're in Dutchess. Let the people in because they will be thoughtful. Probably.
Dare, I'm going to ask you a question as the chair of the programs committee for a second. Could we ever invite one of the people that's sitting on the redistricting committee to have a listening session with the league and figure out what time might be, like, is July the mark for that, or when would be the best time for us to really have a chance to gather our thoughts and give some audience to those people?
I've watched the Dutchess one more than the Ulster one, and so I can't speak to how they're doing or who the spokespeople are. But there are some very good people on the Dutchess one who would be happy to talk. The person they elected as chair seems very reasonable, trying to do a really good job. Really studied what Ulster County did, so he might, just off the top of my head, I would say and I think he's probably a Democrat, so you might want to get a Republican from, somebody appointed by a Republican in Ulster to balance it out, maybe a woman because he's a man, that kind of thing. But I think it'd be really interesting to hear how they're doing it. It's fun for me, having been through the whole process, to listen to them doing the baby steps at the beginning. Like, okay, what are the rules? What do we have to, it's a great process. But I would give it some time because of that. I think they're really still just trying to get their feet wet with the rules. They're listening to the Brennan Center. They're bringing in Brennan Center, the lawyers at NYU, all good government stuff. And they're listening to that, reading that stuff. It's good. And we did too in Ulster. But it takes time to get kind of used to it.
Okay. There is concern that it's the state, not the counties, that is going to be the big problem. But
yeah, that really it's power corrupts, and the Democrats have all the power, and I could see this happening way back because it's irresistible.
Well, we'll have to make our voices heard.
Yep.
And I think that, the state league has definitely made that a priority. So it's 8:00. If that looks like it for the questions.
I just want to say, Kate, I can't believe you got through all of that content and left us time for questions and stayed in an hour. So bravo to you, Kate. Thank you so
Yay.
much.
Thank you.
It was great.
All right, so we are going to stop the recording and thank everyone for your time this evening.